This isn't a public parking lot. You need to leave.
Sergeant, I'm here to retrieve my vehicle. I have the paperwork.
I don't care what you have. You don't belong at this facility.
I'm Andre Fletcher, state auditor. This is my retrieval authorization.
Hands behind your back. You're under arrest for trespassing.
Daniel Ellison stood at the transaction window of impound lot number 4, holding a manila folder with his car retrieval paperwork and trying to stay patient while the clerk typed his information into the computer system. His silver Honda Accord had been towed 3 days earlier during a routine parking enforcement sweep on Maple Street, and he needed it back today because tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. he had to drive his 9-year-old daughter Lily to Children's Hospital for a scheduled surgery that had already been postponed twice and couldn't be delayed again. The $280 impound fee and $150 towing charge had already been paid online that morning. The confirmation email was printed and included in his folder. The paperwork was complete and verified. All he needed was for someone to process the release form, walk him out to the impound lot, verify that the Honda matched his registration and driver's license, unlock the gate, and let him drive home. He had expected this to take 20 minutes, maybe 30 at most, but when Sergeant Brian Keller walked out of the back office and saw a black man in casual clothes standing at the window on a Thursday afternoon, he didn't ask the clerk if the payment had been verified. He didn't check the computer screen to see the transaction confirmation displayed right there in green text. He didn't treat Daniel like every other person who came to retrieve a legitimately towed vehicle. He looked at Daniel's navy blue polo shirt and khaki pants and made an assumption based entirely on appearance, an assumption that had nothing to do with the facts on the computer screen and everything to do with 18 years of unchecked bias. He assumed Daniel was trying to pull some kind of scam, and when Daniel calmly tried to explain who he was and why he was there, Keller refused to listen, interrupted him mid-sentence, and ultimately arrested him for obstruction and failure to comply, never bothering to let Daniel finish opening the black leather credential wallet he pulled from his jacket pocket, the wallet that contained a gold shield identifying him as a senior investigator for the State Office of Inspector General, conducting a 6-month covert investigation into Keller's operation for systematically stealing high-value seized vehicles. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and drop a like. Let me know in the comments, what city or country are you watching from? What Sergeant Brian Keller didn't know was that Daniel Ellison wasn't just a concerned father trying to get his car back so he could take his daughter to the hospital. He was a senior state investigator with 12 years of experience auditing law enforcement facilities, municipal contracts, and government operations for corruption, fraud, waste, and abuse of authority. That the parking enforcement sweep that resulted in Daniel's Honda being towed wasn't random bad luck. It was a pre-approved investigative tactic authorized by the Inspector General's office as the final phase of a 6-month operation, giving Daniel a completely legitimate reason to enter the impound facility as a regular customer and observe Keller's operation firsthand without raising suspicion. That the black leather credential wallet Daniel tried to show Keller, the one Keller turned his head away from before Daniel could even flip it fully open, contained official state identification with a gold shield, a photo ID card, and the seal of the Office of Inspector General clearly visible. That Daniel's daughter, Lily's surgery was real and critical, scheduled for 6 a.m. the next morning to remove a benign but growing tumor that was causing increasing pain and couldn't be postponed a third time without risking complications. That this visit to the impound lot was the last window Daniel had to complete his investigation before the case was escalated to the Attorney General's office for prosecution. And that when Keller's supervisor, Lieutenant Dana Whitaker, arrived, 45 minutes later, reviewed the surveillance footage, made a phone call to verify Daniel's identity, and realized what had just happened. She would remove Keller from the facility immediately, not suspended on the spot as a dramatic gesture, but quietly pulled from duty pending an emergency investigation that would destroy his career within 72 hours. Daniel Ellison grew up in a working-class neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. His father worked for the Postal Service for 34 years. His mother was a public school teacher who taught 5th grade at the same elementary school for her entire career. They raised Daniel and his younger sister in a modest 3-bedroom house with strict rules about education, respect, and responsibility. Daniel's parents had taught him from a young age that authority figures, teachers, police officers, government officials, deserved respect but weren't infallible, and that questioning systems when they didn't work properly was a civic duty, not a sign of disrespect. Daniel excelled in school, graduating high school with honors in 2003 and earning a full scholarship to the University of Illinois, where he studied public policy and criminal justice. He graduated in 2007 with a degree in public administration and immediately entered a master's program in government accountability at Georgetown University in Washington, D.C. He completed his master's degree in 2009 and was hired by the Illinois Auditor General's Office as a junior analyst reviewing state contracts for compliance with procurement regulations. Over the next 6 years, Daniel worked his way up through increasingly complex investigations, reviewing Medicaid billing fraud, auditing state construction contracts, investigating misuse of grant funding. In 2015, he was recruited by the Federal Government Accountability Office to work on a multi-state investigation into prison privatization contracts. That investigation led to criminal indictments, contract cancellations, and Daniel's reputation as someone who could handle sensitive, high-stakes work without leaking information or making politically motivated decisions. In 2018, Daniel married Sarah Chen, a pediatric nurse he met through mutual friends. In 2014, their daughter Lily was born. The marriage was strong for the first few years. 2 professionals building careers, buying a house, raising a daughter together. But by 2020, the stress of Daniel's investigative work, the late nights, the travel, the cases he couldn't discuss at home, had created distance between them. Sarah filed for divorce in 2021. The process was amicable. They agreed on joint custody, with Daniel having Lily every other week and alternating holidays. Sarah remarried in 2022. Daniel remained single, focusing on his daughter and his work. In 2021, Daniel was hired by his current state's Office of Inspector General as a senior investigator with a specialty in law enforcement oversight. His job was to conduct audits and investigations of state and local police departments, sheriff's offices, corrections facilities, and related government operations to identify corruption, civil rights violations, misuse of funds, and systemic problems. Over the next 2 years, Daniel investigated 3 county sheriffs, 2 police chiefs, and multiple individual officers. 2 of those investigations resulted in terminations and criminal prosecutions. 1 resulted in a complete restructuring of a department's evidence handling procedures. By January 2023, Daniel had built a reputation within the Inspector General's office as thorough, patient, and willing to do the deep investigative work that others found tedious. When the office received an anonymous tip about missing vehicles at Municipal Impound Lot Number 4, Daniel was assigned to the case. The tip came from a tow truck driver who had been contracted by the city to transport seized vehicles to the impound lot. Over the course of several months, the driver noticed that certain high-value luxury vehicles, Range Rovers, Porsches, high-end Mercedes sedans, would arrive at the lot during narcotic seizure operations, be logged into the computer system, and then seemingly disappear within weeks without going through the standard auction process that was supposed to take months. The driver had no proof, just observations and suspicions, but it was enough for the Inspector General to open a preliminary inquiry. Daniel spent 6 months on the investigation, working slowly and carefully to avoid tipping off anyone at the facility that they were under scrutiny. He started by analyzing the lot's digital records, comparing intake logs against auction records and release forms. What he found was a pattern. 47 high-value vehicles had been logged into the impound lot system over a 3-year period from 2020 to 2023, all seized during drug trafficking investigations or other felony arrests. According to the digital logs, all 47 had been released through the city's contracted auction house and sold to the highest bidders, with proceeds deposited into the city's general fund as required by law. But when Daniel cross-referenced those auction records with the auction house's own database, he found discrepancies. The auction house had no record of receiving 31 of those 47 vehicles. The intake dates in the impound lot system had been altered, pushed back by weeks or months to create a plausible timeline suggesting the vehicles had been held, processed, and auctioned in accordance with city policy. But the digital timestamps on those alterations showed they had been made by someone with supervisor-level access to the impound lot's computer system. And every single one of those alterations had been made during shifts when Sergeant Brian Keller was the on-duty supervisor. Daniel conducted 14 separate visits to impound lot number 4 over 6 months, each time using a different pretext. He came as a researcher gathering data for a public policy report. He came as a concerned citizen asking about the auction process. He came with colleagues from other departments conducting routine facility inspections. Each visit gave him opportunities to observe the lot's operations, photograph vehicles through the chain link fence, and document which cars were present and which had disappeared. What Daniel discovered was that Keller had developed a system. High-value vehicles would arrive at the lot following seizures. Keller would log them into the computer properly at first, following standard procedures. But instead of processing them through the auction system within the required 90-day window, he would alter the intake date in the digital system, making it appear as though the vehicle had only recently arrived. This bought him time. During that window, he would transport the vehicles off-site, likely during a night shifts when fewer people were around, and deliver them to an unlicensed salvage dealer operating out of an industrial yard on the outskirts of the city. The salvage dealer would strip the vehicles for parts or sell them whole to out-of-state buyers who didn't ask questions about titles. Keller would then generate fake auction paperwork showing the vehicles had been sold through the official process, forging signatures, and using the city's auction house letterhead to create documents that looked legitimate on paper. Over 3 years, Keller had stolen 47 vehicles with a combined estimated value of $1.9 million. The salvage dealer was paying him approximately 40% of each vehicle's black market value, around $760,000 in total theft proceeds split between Keller and his accomplice. By June 2023, Daniel had documented 31 of the 47 thefts with sufficient evidence to prosecute. But he needed one final piece: first-hand observation of Keller's behavior when confronted with a situation that didn't fit his expectations. Daniel needed to see how Keller operated under pressure, how he treated members of the public, whether his documented pattern of theft extended to a pattern of abuse of authority. That's when Daniel came up with the plan to have his own car towed. The operation was authorized by Rebecca Lawson, the Assistant Attorney General overseeing the investigation. The plan was simple. Daniel would park his Honda Accord in a zone scheduled for a routine parking enforcement sweep. His car would be towed legitimately to impound lot number 4. He would pay the fees online, gather his paperwork, and visit the lot as a regular customer. The interaction would be recorded by the lot's own surveillance cameras. Daniel would observe how Keller treated him, whether Keller followed proper procedures, and whether there were any red flags suggesting the sergeant might be aware he was under investigation. What Daniel didn't fully anticipate was that the timing would coincide with his daughter Lily's surgery. Lily had been diagnosed 6 months earlier with a benign tumor growing near her spine. The tumor wasn't cancerous, but it was growing slowly and causing increasing pain in her lower back and legs. Her pediatric surgeon recommended removal before the tumor grew large enough to risk nerve damage. The surgery had been scheduled for March 2023, but Lily caught pneumonia 2 weeks before the procedure and it had to be postponed. It was rescheduled for May, but the surgeon had a family emergency and had to cancel. The third scheduled date was June 16, 2023, the day after Daniel's planned visit to the impound lot. Daniel had coordinated with his ex-wife, Sarah. She would handle the pre-op appointment the evening of June 15th. Daniel would pick Lily up at 5 a.m. on June 16th and drive her to the hospital for the 6 a.m. surgery. He would be there when she went under anesthesia, wait during the 3-hour procedure, and be there when she woke up in recovery. Sarah would join them at the hospital after dropping off her stepson at school. It was all planned. All Daniel needed to do was retrieve his car on the afternoon of June 15th, drive home, get a good night's sleep, and be ready for the morning. The plan fell apart the moment Sergeant Brian Keller saw Daniel Ellison standing at the transaction window. It was 2:17 p.m. on Thursday, June 15th, 2023. The afternoon sun was beating down on the asphalt parking lot outside impound lot number 4. Inside the small office with its bulletproof glass transaction window, Daniel stood holding his manila folder while the clerk, a young woman in her early 20s named Jessica, typed his vehicle information into the computer. "Okay, Mr. Ellison," Jessica said, looking at her screen. I see your payment confirmation here. $280 impound fee, $150 towing, total $430 paid online this morning at 9:47 a.m. Transaction cleared. I just need to print your release form and then someone will walk you out to your vehicle. Thank you, Daniel said. How long does that usually take? Maybe 10, 15 minutes depending on how busy we are today. You can have a seat over there if you want. She gestured toward a row of plastic chairs against the wall. Daniel nodded and started to turn toward the chairs when the door to the back office opened and Sergeant Brian Keller walked out. Keller was 45 years old, white, with graying brown hair cut short and a thick build that came from years of weight training, followed by years of a more sedentary supervisor role. He wore a dark blue police uniform with sergeant stripes on his sleeves and a name badge that read B. Keller above his badge number, 4107. He walked with the confident, heavy stride of someone who had been in law enforcement for 18 years and was used to being the ranking authority in any room he entered. Keller glanced at the computer screen over Jessica's shoulder, then looked up at Daniel standing at the window. His eyes moved from Daniel's face to his polo shirt to his khaki pants to the folder in his hands. The entire visual assessment took maybe 3 seconds. Then Keller's expression shifted, not dramatically, but enough that Daniel noticed. His jaw tightened slightly. His eyes narrowed. It was the look of someone who had just decided something. "Jessica, I'll handle this one," Keller said, his voice carrying the clipped authority of a supervisor overriding a subordinate. Jessica looked up, confused. "Sergeant, I already processed the payment. I was just about to print the release." "I'll handle it," Keller repeated, more firmly this time. He looked directly at Daniel through the bulletproof glass. "Sir, step away from the window." Daniel blinked, caught off guard by the sudden shift in tone. "I'm sorry?" "Step away from the window. This area is for authorized transactions only." Daniel gestured with his folder toward the clerk. "She was processing my—" "I need you to step back, sir," Keller interrupted, his voice getting louder and more commanding. "This is a restricted facility. If you're not here on official business, you need to leave the premises." Daniel felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He kept his voice calm and professional. "Sergeant, I am here on official business. My car was towed 3 days ago. I paid the fees online this morning. The clerk confirmed my payment cleared. I'm here to retrieve my vehicle." Keller shook his head, his expression dismissive. "We've had people try to walk out with cars before. You don't match the registered owner profile for the vehicle you're claiming." Daniel's eyebrows rose slightly. "I'm sorry, what profile?" "The car's registered in my name. Daniel Ellison. Here's my driver's license, my registration, and my payment confirmation." He opened his folder and started pulling out documents. Keller held up a hand, cutting him off. "Sir, I'm not looking at anything until you explain why you're really here. This facility handles high-value evidence seizures. We don't just hand over keys because someone shows up with paperwork." There it was. The assumption, the bias. Daniel could hear it in Keller's tone, the certainty that Daniel didn't belong here, that there must be some scam, some angle, some reason to be suspicious. And it was based on nothing except the fact that Keller looked at a black man in casual clothes and decided this person couldn't possibly be a legitimate customer. Daniel took a slow breath, keeping his composure. "Sergeant, I understand you have security protocols, but I've already been verified by your clerk. My payment has cleared. I have all my documentation right here. If there's a problem with my paperwork, I'm happy to address it. But I need to retrieve my vehicle today. I have a family obligation tomorrow morning that can't be postponed." Keller's jaw tightened further. "Family obligation," he repeated, his tone suggesting he didn't believe it. "Sir, are you refusing to step away from the window when instructed by a law enforcement officer?" Daniel felt the situation escalating and knew he needed to de-escalate immediately. This was supposed to be routine. He reached into his jacket pocket slowly, making sure his movements were visible and non-threatening. "Sergeant, I'm going to show you my credentials. Keep your hands where I can see them," Keller barked, his hand moving instinctively toward his duty belt. Daniel immediately raised both hands, the manila folder still in his right hand, his left hand empty and visible. "My hands are visible. I'm reaching for identification. I'm a state investigator with the Office of Inspector General. I have credentials in my jacket pocket that will verify." "I don't care what you think you are." Keller cut him off. "You're interfering with operations at a secure facility. Turn around and place your hands on the wall." Daniel's mind was racing. This was going wrong. Very wrong. Sergeant, I'm not interfering with anything. I'm a paying customer trying to retrieve my legally towed vehicle. If you'll just let me show you my credentials. Turn around now, Keller commanded, walking around the counter and pushing open the door that separated the office area from the small lobby where Daniel stood. Hands on the wall. Daniel didn't turn around. He kept his hands raised, folder still in his right hand, and spoke clearly. Sergeant, I am not resisting. I am complying with your instructions, but I am formally requesting that you verify my identity before taking any enforcement action. I have state credentials in my jacket pocket. If you'll allow me to retrieve them, you're under arrest for obstruction and failure to comply with a lawful order, Keller said, pulling handcuffs from his belt. Hands behind your back. Daniel's heart was pounding now. This couldn't be happening. Not the day before Lily's surgery, not in the middle of an active investigation, but he also knew that physically resisting would make everything worse. He slowly lowered his hands behind his back, still holding the folder. Keller stepped forward, grabbed Daniel's left wrist, and wrenched it upward sharply, forcing Daniel to drop the folder. Papers scattered across the floor, the payment confirmation, the registration, the driver's license, all of it falling in a messy pile. Keller snapped the first cuff around Daniel's left wrist, then grabbed his right wrist and secured the second cuff. The metal bit into Daniel's skin ratcheted tighter than necessary. Sergeant, Daniel said, his voice tight but still controlled, I am stating for the record that I have not physically resisted. I have complied with your instructions. I am a state investigator conducting an authorized operation. You are arresting me without verifying my identity or examining my credentials. Keller ignored him. He grabbed the short chain connecting the handcuffs and pulled Daniel toward the exit door. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you use it. As Keller marched Daniel toward the door, a woman sitting in one of the plastic chairs against the wall, Elena Ramirez, 34 years old, who had been waiting nearly 25 minutes for someone to process her own vehicle retrieval, pulled out her phone and started recording. She had watched the entire interaction unfold, had seen Keller's aggressive escalation, had heard Daniel calmly trying to show identification. Something about this didn't sit right with her, and she wanted documentation of what she was witnessing. Keller pushed open the glass door and escorted Daniel outside into the afternoon heat. The impound lot stretched out before them, rows of vehicles behind chain-link fencing, security cameras mounted on poles, the smell of hot asphalt and motor oil hanging in the still air. Keller walked Daniel to his patrol vehicle parked near the office, opened the back door, and guided Daniel into the seat with a firm hand on his head. Daniel sat down, hands still cuffed behind him, his mind racing through options. The surveillance cameras had captured everything. Elena's phone recording had captured everything. His credentials were still in his jacket pocket. This was documented, but documentation didn't help him right now. Sitting in the back of a patrol car, unable to call his ex-wife to explain why he might not be there tomorrow morning. Keller closed the door and walked back to the office, leaving Daniel alone in the vehicle. Inside the office, Jessica the clerk looked up at Keller with confusion. Sergeant, his payment cleared. The transaction was legitimate. Why did you... Run a full background check, Keller interrupted, and call for a transport van. I want him processed downtown. Jessica hesitated, then turned back to her computer. But instead of calling for transport, she did something else. She picked up the phone and dialed an internal number, the direct line to Lieutenant Dana Whitaker's office. Whitaker was the shift supervisor for the police precinct that oversaw impound lot number 4. She had worked with Keller for 6 years and had noticed certain patterns in his behavior, particularly his tendency to escalate situations involving people of color, particularly men who came to retrieve vehicles. She had counseled him twice about it, documented concerns in his file, but nothing had risen to the level of formal discipline. When Jessica's call came through explaining what had just happened, Whitaker's instincts told her to respond in person. Daniel sat in the back of the patrol car for 45 minutes. It felt like hours. The afternoon sun beat down on the vehicle, raising the temperature inside, despite the windows being cracked. Daniel's wrists ached from the too tight handcuffs. His mind kept cycling through the same thoughts. Lily's surgery, missing the morning, Sarah having to handle everything alone, the investigation compromised. Keller's reaction when he found out who Daniel actually was. At 3:02 p.m., a black police SUV pulled into the lot and parked next to Keller's patrol vehicle. Lieutenant Dana Whitaker stepped out. She was 42 years old, with 15 years in law enforcement, a reputation for fairness, and very little patience for officers who created problems that landed on her desk. Whitaker walked into the office where Keller was filling out arrest paperwork. "Sergeant, I got a call from your clerk about an arrest. Walk me through what happened." Keller looked up, his expression defensive. Subject attempted to interfere with facility operations, refused to comply with instructions to step back from the restricted area, became agitated when questioned about his presence. I secured him and was preparing transport. Whitaker's eyes narrowed slightly. "Did you run his information, verify his payment, check if he had legitimate business here?" "I assessed the situation based on his behavior and appearance. His behavior and appearance," Whitaker repeated slowly. "Did you let him show you any identification?" Keller hesitated. "He claimed to have credentials but refused to comply with positioning commands." Whitaker walked past Keller to the computer where Jessica was still sitting. "Pull up his payment record." Jessica turned the monitor so Whitaker could see. "Daniel Ellison, payment confirmed 9:47 a.m. this morning, $430. Transaction cleared. Vehicle registration matches his driver's license. Everything is legitimate, Lieutenant." Whitaker looked at Keller. "Where is he now?" "In my vehicle." "Did he physically resist arrest?" "He was non-compliant with—" "Did he physically resist arrest?" Whitaker asked again, her tone making clear she wanted a yes or no answer. Keller's jaw tightened. "No, ma'am." Whitaker walked outside to Keller's patrol vehicle and opened the back door. Daniel looked up at her, exhausted and frustrated. "Lieutenant, my name is Daniel Ellison. I'm a state investigator with the Office of Inspector General. I have credentials in my jacket pocket that your sergeant refused to examine. I need you to contact the Attorney General's office to verify my identity." Whitaker studied Daniel for a long moment. There was something in his tone. Not panic, not anger, but a professional calm that suggested he was used to dealing with difficult situations. "What's the number?" Daniel recited Rebecca Lawson's direct line from memory. "Ask for Assistant Attorney General Rebecca Lawson. Tell her Daniel Ellison has been detained at impound lot 4. She'll verify everything." Whitaker pulled out her phone and dialed the number. The call was answered on the second ring. "Lawson." "Ms. Lawson, this is Lieutenant Dana Whitaker with the Municipal Police. I have a man in custody who claims to be a state investigator named Daniel Ellison. He asked me to call you to verify his identity." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Lawson's voice came through, sharp and cold. "You have Daniel Ellison in custody?" "Yes, ma'am." "What facility?" "Impound lot number 4. Another pause. Then, "Lieutenant, Daniel Ellison is a senior investigator with my office conducting an authorized operation at that facility. He has full state credentials. On what grounds was he detained?" Whitaker glanced back at Keller, who was now standing in the doorway of the office watching. "My sergeant arrested him for obstruction and failure to comply." "Did he physically resist?" "No, ma'am." "Did he attempt to show credentials?" "He claims he tried to." "My sergeant says he refused to comply with positioning commands." Lawson's voice got harder. "Lieutenant, I need you to remove those handcuffs immediately and apologize to my investigator. Then I need you to remove your sergeant from that facility and secure all computer systems and physical records pending a full investigation. Do you understand what I'm telling you?" Whitaker felt her stomach drop. "Yes, ma'am." "I'm calling your chief right now. Expect him to contact you within 5 minutes." The call ended. Whitaker stood there for a moment, processing what had just happened. Then she walked to Keller's vehicle, opened the back door, and pulled out her handcuff key. "Mr. Ellison, I'm removing the cuffs. I apologize for the detention." Daniel brought his hands forward as the cuffs came off, rubbing his wrists where the metal had left red marks. "Thank you." Whitaker helped him out of the vehicle. "Sir, I need to see those credentials." Daniel reached into his jacket pocket slowly and pulled out the black leather credential wallet. He flipped it open. Inside was a gold shield with the seal of the Office of Inspector General embossed at the top. Below it was a laminated photo ID card showing Daniel's name, photo, and title, Senior Investigator. Whitaker stared at the badge for a long moment. Then she looked at Keller, who had gone pale. "Sergeant, get in your vehicle and return to the precinct. You're relieved of duty pending investigation." Keller opened his mouth to argue, but the look on Whitaker's face stopped him. He got in his patrol car and drove away without another word. Whitaker turned back to Daniel. "Mr. Ellison, I am deeply sorry for what just happened. Is there anything you need?" Daniel checked his watch. 3:15 p.m. He had to pick up Lily at 5 p.m. from Sarah's house. He had to prepare for tomorrow morning. He needed his car. I need to retrieve my vehicle and go home. I'll personally walk you to your car right now. 20 minutes later, Daniel was driving his silver Honda Accord out of the impound lot. His wrists still ached, his mind was still racing, but he had his car. He drove home, called Rebecca Lawson to debrief, sent her the lot's surveillance footage that Jessica had provided without needing to be asked, and then sat on his couch trying to process what had just happened. That night, Daniel picked up Lily from Sarah's house as planned. He drove her to the hospital for the pre-op appointment at 7 p.m. The pediatric surgeon reviewed the procedure, answered Lily's questions about what would happen when she woke up, and confirmed the 6 a.m. surgery time. At 5 a.m. the next morning, Daniel drove Lily to Children's Hospital. She was scared, but trying to be brave. Daniel held her hand in the pre-op room, told her he loved her, and watched as they wheeled her into surgery. The procedure took 3 hours. The surgeon successfully removed the tumor with no complications. Lily woke up in recovery with Daniel sitting beside her bed. Sarah arrived shortly after. Lily recovered fully over the following weeks. Sergeant Brian Keller was terminated from the police department 72 hours after the incident, following an emergency internal affairs investigation. The review of surveillance footage showed that he had arrested Daniel without cause, refused to examine offered credentials, and escalated the situation based on appearance rather than behavior. But the termination was just the beginning. Once Keller was removed from the facility, the full scope of Daniel's 6-month investigation was revealed. The State Attorney General's office, armed with Daniel's documentation of 31 stolen vehicles and additional evidence gathered after Keller's removal, obtained search warrants for Keller's financial records, phone records, and the salvage dealer's property. The unlicensed salvage dealer, when faced with overwhelming evidence, cooperated with prosecutors. He provided detailed testimony about his arrangement with Keller, including records of 47 vehicles purchased illegally between 2020 and 2023. The district attorney filed a 49-count indictment against Brian Keller in August 2023, 47 counts of grand theft auto, 1 for each stolen vehicle, 1 count of official misconduct, and 1 count of false imprisonment for Daniel's arrest. The total value of the stolen vehicles was assessed at $1.9 million. The trial took place in October 2024, 15 months after the arrest. The evidence was overwhelming. Digital timestamps showing Keller's alterations to intake records, financial records showing unexplained deposits into Keller's accounts totaling $760,000 over 3 years, the salvage dealer's testimony, and surveillance footage of the June 15, 2023 incident showing Keller's refusal to examine Daniel's credentials. Keller's defense attorney argued that his client had made an honest mistake during the arrest, that he genuinely believed Daniel was acting suspiciously. But the prosecution played the surveillance footage showing Daniel calmly attempting to show credentials while Keller repeatedly refused to look. The jury deliberated for 8 hours and returned guilty verdicts on all 49 counts. The judge sentenced Keller to 8 years in state prison, 6 months for each of the 47 vehicle thefts to run consecutively, plus additional time for official misconduct and false imprisonment. Keller was also ordered to pay $1.9 million in restitution, an impossible sum that would follow him for the rest of his life. His law enforcement certification was permanently revoked. His municipal pension was forfeited entirely due to crimes committed in the course of his employment. Daniel Ellison returned to work the week after Lily's surgery. He received a formal commendation from the Inspector General for his 6-month investigation and his professionalism during the June 15th incident. He was promoted to chief investigator in 2024, overseeing a team of auditors conducting oversight of law enforcement agencies across the state. Impound lot number 4 was shut down for 6 weeks during the investigation, then reopened under new management with reformed procedures. All vehicle releases now require supervisor verification. All arrests on facility grounds require lieutenant approval, and surveillance footage is reviewed weekly by an independent auditor. Eleni Ramirez, the civilian witness who recorded the incident on her phone, provided her footage to the Attorney General's office. Her video was played at Keller's trial and helped corroborate Daniel's account of the arrest. Lieutenant Dana Whitaker remained with the police department and later testified at Keller's trial about the departmental concerns regarding his pattern of behavior that had been documented but not acted upon. Her testimony contributed to departmental reforms regarding supervisor accountability. As of March 2026, Brian Keller is incarcerated at a state correctional facility serving his 8-year sentence. His earliest possible release date is June 2029, after serving 75% of his sentence. Daniel Ellison continues his work as chief investigator, conducting sensitive investigations into government corruption. Lily is now 12 years old, healthy, and thriving. Daniel still has joint custody with his ex-wife, and he never misses Lily's important appointments. The lesson was public, documented, and permanent. Refusing to look at someone's credentials because you've already decided who they are based on appearance will cost you everything. Assuming someone doesn't belong because of the color of their skin will destroy your career. And arresting a state investigator in the middle of his own investigation of your crimes is the fastest way to guarantee that investigation ends with you in prison. If you believe a father retrieving his car to take his daughter to surgery shouldn't be arrested because a cop made assumptions based on skin color, share this story. What reforms would prevent impound lot supervisors from abusing their authority? Drop your answer in the comments. And if this reminded you that sometimes the person you're arresting is exactly the person investigating you, subscribe to this channel. We're not stopping until badges matter when people actually look at them